You able to hear me? Okay, I'm going to assume that people can hear me now. I'm going to share my screen. Um, and I've sent a request to share my screen. Okay, so I'm going to share my PowerPoint screen. So let me just see the screen that I'm sharing. Okay, just want to confirm that everybody can hear me.
Yes, can hear, can see
Oh,
as well.
okay, can hear, can see. Good. We got the technology working. So, welcome to the 17th class using Brother Tio's class notes. Now, in this class, we're going to be trying something a little different. After the last class, it was suggested actually by my wife, who was listening, and also confirmed by Albert and some others, that maybe it's better I jump from the suttas topic directly into the Abhidhamma. So I'm going to jump directly into the third division of Brother Tio's notes and start focusing just on the Abhidhamma. And after the class, we'll have a group in the group chat, have a discussion whether the class wants me to continue with the Abhidhamma or go back to the suttas and continue with that. So there'll be two options. So the first slide, oops. The the ultimate reality or paramattha um, are materiality or rupa, two, mind or chitta, three, mental factors or cetasika, and four, unconditioned state, nibbana. All right, so this is an excerpt from Brother Tio's notes. I'm now going to dive in with my own discussion. Ultimate reality is an interesting term. Ultimate reality is the smallest indivisible phenomena that can be experienced. It has a intrinsic nature or characteristic or experience of an ultimate reality, and it's always the same. Um, I use the analogy of pixels of phenomena. They are experienced directly. They're not constructed by the mind. Just like when we look at a screen, actually there are individual pixels there, but what we normally view and what we normally perceive is the whole picture here. So for example, in this particular screen, there are green pixels, white pixels, red pixels, blue pixels, but we see an overall image. The overall image is a concept. The pixels of reality are the individual experiences. Um, Now, the word reality has been a topic of discussion since the time of Aristotle. Western philosophers have had all sorts of discussions about reality. It's a branch of philosophy called ontology, and this ontology tries to define what exists. The focus of the Abhidhamma is not to define what exists, but the Abhidhamma seeks to see or discern what arises and passes away in direct experience. So it's a bit of a difference here. It's not a effort to define what exists. It is what answer the question, what arises and passes away in direct experience. So ontology, the philosophy is conceptual. They use a lot of logic and thinking and analysis. On the other hand, Abhidhamma is experiential, based on the experience, and experience is sharpened when one's continuous mindfulness and momentary concentration is developed through vipassana practice. Also, the purpose is different. Ontology or philosophy is descriptive, trying to describe something, whereas the purpose and focus of Abhidhamma is liberative. It's to lead to enlightenment, lead to liberation. So let's go a little bit more into ultimate reality. Everything is either an ultimate reality or a concept. What's included under ultimate realities? Ultimate realities include the mind's experiences of the mind itself. That's consciousness and the mental factors or cetasikas, the mind's experiences of the body, and the mind's experiences of sense objects. Like in modern science, the subatomic particles of modern physics are the basic ingredients of matter. The Buddhist ultimate realities, they're the basic ingredients of both mind and matter. Ultimate realities are the meditator's perspective on what is experienced by the mind. So the physicists have this concept, this model of quarks. Atoms are made up of protons and electrons, and those protons and electrons are made up of quarks. Theoretically, there might be something smaller than that, but they don't have a model for it yet. On the other hand, the Abhidhamma says matter is made up of what is experienced, the experience of hardness, the experience of warmth, the experience of pushing. All these are direct experiences. So, how matter is defined in the Abhidhamma is very different from a meditator's perspective as compared to the models used by scientists. Now, concepts, they're not real. Concepts, they're created by the mind. So examples of concepts include time, space, words, ideas, names, people, places, events. They're all concepts. Concepts are the foundation of our conventional reality. Like when we look at the big screen here, we see a semicircle of red. Well, semicircle is a concept. Red is a concept. Actually, it's individual. What is experienced are small visible objects arising at the retina. That's what actually exists as an ultimate reality. So the concept of self, now that one is most important. That is central to our thinking. The concept of self, deeply ingrained, not just integrated, but ingrained in our mind. When we have a dream, for example, always it's from the first person perspective. It's always things happening to us. So even in a dreamlike state where we seem to have no control over what's happening, there is a us, an I at the center. So ultimate realities are experienced by the mind, whereas concepts are thought about. Concepts are just thought about. And differentiating between ultimate realities and concepts has practical implications. It's not just theory. Concepts are created by the mind, our perceptions, thoughts, and beliefs create our own subjective, personal, conceptual reality. So my personal conceptual reality will differ from your personal conceptual reality. And so when we recognize this, our idea of who is right becomes less rigid. We can't insist, oh, my way of thinking, my way of seeing things is the only way, and my way is correct and yours is wrong. When we recognize that thoughts and concepts are simply, all these ideas are created by the individual mind, they become much more individual, become more flexible to accepting that there is more than one way of seeing things, more than one way of observing things. Before I continue, any questions on what I have just been sharing? Okay, can somebody say something so I know that there's people out there?
Okay, Brother Rob,
Yeah,
can I
good. I have a
ask?
question.
So concept is we can't say whether any concept is right or wrong.
What do you mean by right or wrong? What is meant when you are saying you don't know whether a concept is right or wrong? How do we know what is right and what is wrong? What is defined as right or wrong?
Or who is to define what is right or what is wrong
Okay.
from
If
a certain concept?
if you are talking about ethical stuff, about what is right or what is wrong, then the Buddha gives a very clear answer. What the Buddha said is any thought or idea that is based on attachment, aversion, or delusion is wrong, ethically unwholesome, is not good. On the other hand, anything that is any thought, idea that is based on non attachment, in other words, generosity, non aversion, in other words, loving kindness, non delusion, in other words, wisdom, that is ethically wholesome. Okay, so so that is how the Buddha answered what is right, what is wrong, is by referring back to the ethical roots of attachment, aversion, and delusion, and non-greed, non-hatred, and penetrative understanding or wisdom. So does that help?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
yes, yes. Thank you.
Okay, great. So the Vipassana meditator, I'm now going to the concentration sutta in the Anguttara Nikaya, Book of Force. The according to that sutta, Vipassana meditation is the penetrative understanding of conditioned phenomena. And there's a lot of really big words in there. I'm going to come back and go through each of those words in detail. So Vipassana meditation takes ultimate realities as their object. And the suttas define Vipassana meditation as the understanding of conditioned phenomena. So understanding here doesn't involve thinking or analysis. Understanding is directly experiencing. So, and when the suttas talk about conditioned phenomena, and we'll talk about that in a bit, they are referring to ultimate realities. Whenever the Buddha talks about conditioned phenomena, Sankhata Dhamma is the Pali term, they're referring to ultimate realities. So that is how Vipassana is defined in this sutta. In the same sutta, samatha meditation, it talks about how how it makes the mind work. It makes the mind steady, composed, unified, and concentrated. So samatha meditation almost always takes concepts as the object. Concepts are not conditioned phenomena. The suttas define samatha meditation as making the mind steady, composed, unified, and concentrated. So for example, metta meditation is a type of samatha meditation that takes specific beings or all beings as the object. The goal of samatha meditation is to become absorbed into the object. So the samatha meditator doesn't want the object to be variable. They don't want to see the impermanence of ultimate realities. because they want to become absorbed in it, they want the object to be very stable. So this is a description of the difference, but this sutta gives a description of the difference between vipassana and samatha. Vipassana taking conditioned phenomena or ultimate realities as the object, and samatha making the mind steady, composed, unified, and concentrated. This is not to say that the Vipassana meditator doesn't need a steady, composed, unified, and concentrated mind. They need that, but the type of concentration or unification or composure or steadiness for the Vipassana meditator is different. For the Vipassana meditator, it needs to focus on the momentary aspect of the object so the meditator can experience the arising and falling away of the object. For the samatha meditator, they want to become absorbed into the object. As an analogy, the samatha meditator is like a pin cushion. They want to fix the needle in the pin cushion and just have it rest there, stable, not moving. On the other hand, Vipassana meditation is taking that very same sharp pin, but as part of a needle in a sewing machine, very fast, going in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out. And when we say in and out, in and out, in and out, it's momentarily connecting with the object, which is, in this analogy, the fabric, momentarily penetrating and then coming back out. So in Vipassana meditation, the concentration is just as sharp, but it's not merged and lodged into the pincushion. It's in and out, in and out, in and out, like a sewing machine. All right. So that explains the difference between Vipassana, such as insight meditation, looking at the changing nature of conditioned phenomena, and samatha meditation, which involves absorption into the object. So becoming absorbed into the experience of loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, or absorbed into a feeling of equanimity toward other beings. Okay, so any questions on the difference between vipassana and samatha, ultimate reality versus concepts as the object? Okay, so the object of samatha almost always concepts. When we're talking radiating loving kindness to a person is not an ultimate reality. It is a concept. The Abhidhamma Sangaha, they group ultimate realities into four categories. And the Pali terms are, as we saw earlier from Brother Tio's notes, Chitta, Chittasika, Rupa, and Nibbana. Chitta is typically translated as consciousness. Now, it's the bare awareness of the object. Now, in English, the word consciousness is related to terms such as unconscious, subconscious. Psychology has really taken this word consciousness and expanded it in different ways, modern psychology. But these concepts of unconscious and subconscious, not part of the Abhidhamma. That's not part of the language. In the Abhidhamma, consciousness is just the bare awareness of the object. And this is just one example of the challenge of translating Abhidhamma terms into English. The English term, for example, consciousness, very often has additional associations, that a lot of extra baggage that don't apply to the Abhidhamma term. So the Abhidhamma term sometimes covers a broader scope than any one English term. So when I talk about the word rupa in Pali, it's got a very broad English definition. On the other hand, when I talk about consciousness in English, it's got a very broad definition. And this difference between broadness and precision is one of the challenges in translating between the Buddhist terms, the Pali terms, and the English terms. Cetasikas are mental factors or mental ingredients which accompany consciousness. Sometimes cetasikas are called concomitants to emphasize that they arise together with consciousness. So when something is called a concomitant, it arises together, and they're classified as being wholesome, unwholesome, or ethically variable. Mindfulness is an example of a wholesome cetasika. Attachment is an example of an unwholesome cetasika. Energy and attention are examples of ethically variable cetasikas. So, depending on which other cetasikas arise at the same time, energy and attention can be wholesome, unwholesome, or neutral. So, if there's attachment, the energy that arises with it is unwholesome. The attachment that arises together with attachment is unwholesome. On the other hand, if there is a detachment, if there is non-greed or generosity, the energy that arises then is wholesome. The attention that arises is wholesome. In neutral mental states, neutral citas are things such as when there is a dot of color on the arising at the back of the retina, there is awareness or consciousness of this dot of color. There's no attachment, there's no detachment, there is simply a registration of that or a perception of that dot of color. So in that time, attention, and there can be attention to it, there can be energy, is neither unwholesome nor wholesome. It's ethically neutral in this case, so it can be ethically variable. Taken together, consciousness and mental factors are mind or nama in Pali. Mind or consciousness and cetasikas only arises in living beings. So you can have plants that we say are alive, but not according to the Buddhist definition. Plants are matter only. However, that matter can respond to sound, it can respond to light, it can respond to external stimuli, but plants do not have a mind. On the other hand, animals and humans have a mind. Okay, and they have consciousness and associated mental factors. The third category of ultimate realities is rupa, and that's loosely translated and very loosely translated as materiality. But when we're talking about rupa, it's important to understand that it's considered an object of the senses. So it is what is experienced through the five physical senses of sight, sound, taste, smell, and touch. It's the objects of those things, of those five physical senses, that are rupa. Rupa can be either internal or external. Internal rupas are part of the body. So parts of the body can be taken as sense objects. So for example, the wind element that arises during rising, falling, the experience of rising, falling, that's the experience of pushing that can be taken as a sense object. When meditating and watching the rising and falling of the abdomen, there is the experience of pushing that is an internal rupa. External rupas are sense objects that are not part of the body. For example, the fire element, the experience of coolness arising at the soles of the feet when walking. So, when doing walking meditation, one places the foot down on there's the experience of placing the foot down. That is the internal wind element. And when the foot is placed down, there is the experience of coolness of the floor. That is the external fire element. So the first Vipassana insight knowledge, Namarupa Paracheta Jnana, that is the discernment of mind and materiality as distinct ultimate realities. So it's the separation, the ability of the mind to separate, oh, this is mind and this is materiality. And this is an understanding based on immediate experience without thinking. This isn't um, analysis, or this is not something that you reflect upon. It is something that, oh, this very moment, there is arising materiality and there is the nama, which is aware of that materiality. And that basic separation of nama from rupa, from mind from materiality, is the foundation for all the other vipassana insights, of the higher vipassana insights, eventually leading to nibbana. So, any questions on what I've just covered here? Chitta, Chittasika, Rupa. Okay. So, how many ultimate realities are included in every category? Consciousness is a single ultimate reality with a characteristic, because remember, every ultimate reality has a specific, unique characteristic. So if there are 52 chittasikas, there are 52 unique experiences, 52 unique characteristics, one for each of the chittasikas. However, there is also general characteristic for all ultimate realities. A general characteristic is anicca or impermanence. All those 52 chittasikas have a common characteristic of impermanence. They all arise, exist momentarily, and then fall away. All 52 of them. So every ultimate reality has a unique, special characteristic and a common general characteristic of anicca, dukkha, and anatta. Consciousness if we look at it from a pure point of view, there is one ultimate reality called consciousness. That is the bare awareness, the bare knowing of the object. But consciousness never arises alone, never happens just by itself. It always arises with a collection of the chittasikas, those mental factors, as a chitta. And using the most common classification of consciousness and chittasikas, chittas can arrive in 89 combinations. So there are 89 chittas. And there's another method of classification. Consciousness and chittasikas can arise in 121 different combinations. So there's 121 chittas. So to give an analogy, there's only one human species, but we can categorize people into more than 100 nationalities. Sometimes in the Abhidhamma, the term chitta is used to mean just consciousness, and sometimes it's used to mean the combination of consciousness and chittasikas. So I'm going to be very careful in my use of the term. I will use the term consciousness to refer to the ultimate reality, and I will use the term chitta as a combination of consciousness plus chittasikas. So a cheetah, yes, it exists only for a moment, but it doesn't have so it has the reality of, it has the common characteristic of impermanence, but it's not every cheetah has the same specific characteristic. Sometimes, even within a specific cheetah, sometimes, say, attachment can be strong, sometimes it can be weak. And those mind moments can feel very different because of the different strength of chittasikas. The According to the Abhidhamma, there are 52 chittasikas, and they're a very important topic for Vipassana yogis. Even though the Abhidhamma Sangha only allocates one chapter out of 9 to chittasikas, I'm developing a long, long series of videos just on chittasikas, specifically for Vipassana yogis. So I'm going to be putting a lot of emphasis on chittasikas because they're very important to Vipassana. According to the Abhidhamma, there are 28 kinds of rupa. And Abhidhamma is a meditator's perspective. So the analysis of matter is very different from the approach taken by modern science. And finally, Nibbana is of one type. Nibbana has the unique characteristic of peace. It does not have because it's not conditioned, as we'll discuss later, Abhidhamma is not conditioned, and so it does not have the general characteristics of anicca or dukkha, of impermanence or suffering, like the chitta, chittasikas, and rupas do. However, it does have the universal characteristic of anatta, non-self. And Nibbana is not self. Moments of peace in daily life, they're nothing compared to the peace of the lower meditation insights. And the peace of the lower insights, nothing compared to the peace of higher insights. And the peace of higher meditation insights, that's nothing compared to the peace of Nibbana. Now, the word Nibbana can be made up of two parts. Ni, which means away from, and vana, which means craving. So Nibbana can mean away from craving. Nibbana is an object of meditation that can be experienced. It's not a place or a destination like a heaven. Nibbana is impossible to clearly explain to those who have never experienced it. Like, for example, a turtle who spends part of their life on land and part of their life in the sea cannot explain the land to fishes who have never experienced the land. This is why the Buddha described Nibbana by saying what it is not. The suttas describe Nibbana as being unconditioned, unborn, unoriginated, uncreated, unformed. All those negative things to try and explain what is Nibbana. If you want to have a positive way of describing it, you could say ultimate peace, because that is the unique, special characteristic of Nibbana as an ultimate reality. Okay, any questions on the quantities or what I've just been going through? Okay, so how does an appreciation of ultimate realities support our spiritual development in daily life? Awareness of consciousness helps us to observe thoughts, emotions, mental states as they come up. Cultivating mindfulness of consciousness allows us to develop greater clarity and stability of mind. This clarity and stability allows us to make wiser decisions, respond more skillfully to challenges, and to cultivate positive qualities such as compassion and equanimity. In daily life, it's unlikely we're going to be able to um, actually experience consciousness directly, but rather consciousness together with the chittasikas, the current state of mind can be experienced. What is my mind state right now? Is it a mind state that has consciousness plus attachment? Is it a mind state that has consciousness plus aversion? Or is it a mind state that has consciousness without attachment? In other words, a mind state that has consciousness of the what's happening plus a feeling of detachment or generosity. Or is it a mind state that has consciousness and non-aversion? In other words, awareness of what's happening right now plus the experience of acceptance, of loving kindness. These are no, experiences of the entire chitta rather than just the consciousness. Now, for the recognizing and understanding the chittasika, mental factors such as desire, aversion, intention, that gives you an insight, an understanding of the underlying habitual patterns of our thoughts and behaviors. We truly are creatures of habit. Viewing these habits, putting those habits under a spotlight, gives us the power to change. If we're simply controlled by habits all the time, our ability to change is limited. So, by observing those mental factors, the chittasikas in daily life, we gain greater self awareness, self control. Understanding those habitual patterns can lead to strategies for, for transformation, for change, for improvement. Now, being mindful of physical sensation grounds us in the present moment, and it causes a deeper connection with the body. When we learn to recognize how physical sensations impact our emotions, thoughts, overall well-being, we can see how the what we physically experience impacts the mind. And generating awareness of this mind-body connection, that promotes holistic well-being, reduces stress, makes tension less. And by observing bodily sensations with equanimity, we can develop resilience to physical discomfort. In other words, being aware that, oh, there is pain arising. And rather than just reacting to that pain, there is a awareness of the pain as a object. And it's a very good object because it grabs the mind's attention. Observing how that how that pain changes. It's a twisting pain. Is it a burning pain? Is it a hard pain? And how it changes over time, you're getting insight into the nature of the pain. In daily life, aspiring toward liberation from suffering motivates us to engage in spiritual practices, cultivate mindfulness, live with greater intention and purpose, recognizing that true happiness and freedom, they lie beyond worldly attachments that can motivate us to cultivate spiritual qualities and pursue inner peace and meditation. So recognizing that, look, all these attachments that I have to a car, my car, my house, even attachments to my family, they're a source of suffering. Getting rid of attachments can be done by training the mind through Vipassana meditation. All right. So, before any questions on the daily life aspects? All right. Now, chitta Chittasikas and rupa are conditioned. They arise momentarily when supported by conditions, and they fall away when conditions disappear. So vipassana meditation must take a conditioned object. Consciousness, Chaitasika, or Rupa are the only valid objects of Vipassana meditation. Concepts arise as a result of thinking, and they are not valid Vipassana objects. So there's a verse in the Dhammapada, Sabe Sankara Anicca, which means all conditioned things are impermanent. So Chitta, Chittasika, and Rupa arise because of conditions. So they're conditioned. The next verse of the Abhidhamma says, Sabe Sankara Dukkha, which means all conditioned things are suffering. So Chitta, Chittasika, and Rupa have the characteristic of suffering, painfulness, and unsatisfactoriness. Even pleasant feelings, pleasant experiences are unsatisfactory because they are momentary, they are unstable. You cannot rest the mind on them. Pleasant experiences disappear in a moment. They're no strong foundation. The next verse in the Dhammapada is Sabe Dhamma Anatta, which means all Dhammas are non-self. So you notice the change here, the shift from Sankara to Dhammas. This is because Nibbana is now included. So the Sankaras are Chitta, Chaitasika, Rupa. Dhammas are Chitta, Chaitasika, Rupas, Nibbana. And all of them are non-self. They can, because they cannot be controlled. Now, there's another sutta, according to the Sankatalakkhana Sutta, the conditioned things have three characteristics. Arising is experienced, dissolution is experienced, and change during presence is experienced. Now, Sankata means condition, and Lakkhana means characteristic. In other words, consciousness, Chittasikas, and Rupa have an arising phase, a dissolution phase, and a presence phase. And then the sutta continues saying that the unconditioned element, in other words, Nibbana, does not have these characteristics. Now let's look at this let's look at it from an Abhidhamma perspective. The Abhidhamma models the mind as a series of mind moments. There are millions of mind moments arising and falling away each second. And the Abhidhamma divides each mind moment into three sub-moments. During the arising sub-moment, consciousness and all its associated chittasikas, they come into existence. During the dissolution sub-moment, consciousness and the associated chittasikas fall away. So the Vipassana yogi first notices the present sub-moment as their mindfulness and continuous mindfulness and momentary concentration strengthen, they can notice the arising sub-moment. So when the meditator is meditating, there is first awareness of the presence of the ultimate reality. As the mindfulness becomes more continuous and the concentration becomes firmer and stronger, the needle becomes sharper, the focus becomes sharper, the concentration becomes sharper, then there is awareness of not just of the presence, but the arising phenomena, the arising sub-moment. Then the dissolution sub-moment is almost the dissolution sub-moment. That's when things fall away. All right. And that is the most subtle. That is the most subtle aspect to observe. Seeing it exist is relatively easy. Seeing something come into existence is more subtle. Seeing it fall away before the next experience comes, and these experiences are happening millions of times every second, that is the most difficult. So how do anicca, dukkha, anatta compare in theory and as they arise in vipassana practice? Anicca is usually translated as impermanence. And the concept of impermanence usually means like temporary. So when we say the body ages or the mind changes, we're talking about the concept of impermanence. On the other hand, the vipassana experience of anicca is of momentary existence. This is the experience of the ultimate reality constantly arising and dissolving a million times a second. Dukkha is usually translated as suffering, and the concept of suffering usually means painful. So when we say the body hurts, the mind's upset, we're talking about the concept of suffering. On the other hand, the vipassana experience of dukkha is unsatisfactoriness, the experience of uneasiness, oppression, and fearfulness that arises because the five aggregates that is taken up as self are unreliable. They cannot be a foundation for true happiness. So experiencing this is like having the rug pulled out from underneath you, like having nothing to stand on. So in Pali, the concept of suffering is called dukkha dukkha, and the vipassana experience of dukkha is called sankhara dukkha because it's related to the conditioned aspect of dukkha. Anatta is usually translated as non-self. Now, the concept of non-self is usually related to the five aggregates. This is the idea that there's no permanent being and no soul, only those five aggregates. On the other hand, the vipassana experience of anatta is that there's no control. This is the experience of no controlling agent behind the ultimate reality, that these ultimate realities arise momentarily due to an impersonal, natural conditions. You can't control them. All you can do is just stand there and watch as they fall away, and there's nothing you can do about it. You're helpless. There's a feeling of helplessness. Now, in the suttas, sometimes the Buddha referred to the concepts of impermanence, suffering, and non-self. And sometime in the same sutta, the Buddha referred to the vipassana experiences of anicca, dukkha, and anatta. So, for example, in the very first sutta, Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the Buddha said that birth, aging, illness, and death are suffering. Now, here, the Buddha was talking about the concept of suffering. But in the same sutta, the Buddha said that the five aggregates subject to clinging are dukkha. And that is referring to the vipassana experience of dukkha. Now, in the second sutta, the Anattana-lakkhana Sutta, the Buddha analyzed the being into the five aggregates. And when the Buddha said this, when he was explaining this, he was using the concept of non-self. But in the same sutta, the Buddha said that there is no control over the five aggregates. And that's referring to the vipassana experience of anatta. So, all right, any questions on the anicca, dukkha, anatta, or impermanence, suffering, non-self, and how they are related but different? Okay, so now let's relate this to daily life. We're reflecting on anicca, usually the concept of anicca. How does this appreciation of anicca or impermanence support our spiritual development in daily life? When we grasp things less when we when we grasp less tightly onto things, whether those are material possessions, relationships, or emotions, we reduce suffering. Knowing that situations and feelings are impermanent helps us to release attachment. Practicing mindfulness allows us to observe the arising and passing away of thoughts, emotions, and sensations. And this awareness helps us to respond skillfully to life's challenges. Of course, mindfulness in daily life is only a glimpse of mindfulness that arises during meditation. Knowing that moments are fleeting, constantly dissolving, encourages us to savor each experience fully, really cherish every moment. We appreciate the beauty of impermanence, the changing seasons, sunset, or your spouse's smile. Witnessing the constant changing of nature of things can cultivate calmness and acceptance instead of clinging and striving. And it creates more equanimity in the face of the ups and downs of life. How does an appreciation of dukkha support our spiritual development in daily life? Or dukkha or suffering? Recognizing that life won't always meet our expectations helps us to navigate disappointments with equanimity. We learn to accept both the joy and the sorrow gracefully. Knowing that everyone experiences dukkha, we cultivate compassion for ourselves and others. And we recognize a shared vulnerability, offering kindness rather than chasing. For example, when my wife is scolding me, I see directly, she is experiencing dukkha at that moment. And that experience of dukkha is very unpleasant for her. And that generates compassion. It makes me want to fix whatever she's scolding me about. So, knowing that everyone experiences dukkha, we can cultivate more compassion for ourselves and others. Rather than chasing perpetual happiness, we find contentment in simplicity. We appreciate small joys without clinging to them desperately. And understanding the inherent unsatisfactoriness in clinging to impermanent things allows us to see the source of our suffering and motivates us to seek a lasting solution, such as meditation, training the mind through meditation. Now, how does an appreciation of anatta or non-self support our spiritual development in daily life? When we realize that there's no fixed I, we become less defensive, more open-minded. We let go of very rigid self-views and we embrace growth. Recognizing our interconnectedness with all beings, we act with compassion and empathy. We understand that our well-being is linked to the well-being of others. And when we don't cling to a fixed self-image, we're less affected by praise or criticism. We find freedom in being fluid, adaptable. Seeing that actions ultimately impact not just a fixed self, but the interconnected web of existence can motivate more ethical behavior. What I am doing impacts others. So it encourages us to act with consideration for the well-being of not just ourselves, but also the well-being of others. So I'm finished with the discussion of ultimate realities. In the next class, if we decide we're going to continue with this, I will start doing a deep dive into concepts. So questions on what I have been talking about today? So no questions for today? Can the people in the class hear me?
Yes, yes, yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so if there are no questions today, I will turn it over to those in the class to read the closing reflections.
But Rob,
Yes.
I have one question.
Yep.
Can you highlight on this enhance this wait on this freedom from identity crisis and the enhanced morality when they talk about the anatta?
Okay. The what I said, yeah, is that when one sees a self conceptually as merely a momentary co-arising of many different mental factors and physical factors, the idea of a self, kind of the importance of that self dissolves. And so if I see that what, quote, I, and I'm putting the word I in air quotes, what I am is merely a combination of arising, conditioned arising mental states, mental factors, and physical factors, there is less attachment to that idea of a self, to personality view in Pali Sakaya Diti, and there is less attachment to the identity. All right. So one becomes freed from the identity and recognizing that there is a web of interconnectedness between what is conventionally called a self and what is conventionally called other people. So perhaps a good thing that, quote, I do impacts another, quote, person, and that ripples out. And that good thing impacts more and more people, like waves emanating from my, quote, my behavior. So goodness radiates outwards, but also unwholesome anger, aversion, attachment, greed, materialism, all of that also influences others and radiates out like an negative energy wave. So, given that viewing the universe as a whole pattern of these waves interacting, if there can be a absorbing of the negative and re-emanating more positive, there is a overall improvement or a positive effect on the universe. So I remember an example. I remember an example. Um, there was a person who worked for me, and I had to let them go. All right, there was a whole bunch of reasons why, budget cuts, etc. I had to let them go. I knew that this was going to be a negative thing, but one day I came in and I bought some muffins and passed it to him with the hope, with the desire that, look, I know that just it's out the letting you go is outside my control, but here is something within my control. I'm offering you some muffins to try and make the world your world just maybe a little bit better at this moment. Maybe that's not a good example, but hopefully you can capture essence of what I am saying of negative energy, trying to absorb as much negative energy and radiate as much positive energy as possible. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
Brother Rob,
Yep.
one question is that not typically a person have more negative thoughts than the positive thoughts. How come? Because we tend to see negative. Is it for us to prepare to in face of danger, overcome the fear? That's why we tend to have more negative thoughts.
Okay. Why do many people have more negative thoughts than positive thoughts? According to Buddhism, we are built our planes of existence. We have to recognize that our personality was shaped and influenced by habits generated over multiple lifetimes. And the number of beings in the Brahma realms, very, very small. The number of beings in the Deva realms, small. The number of beings in the human realms, small. The number of beings in the unfortunate realms, very big, and bigger as we go down. So many of us will have been reborn into a human existence from a unfortunate realm where there was a long period of habits built up. And so there is a natural tendency towards attachment, a natural tendency often towards aversion, fault finding, and seeing things in a negative way. There is a kind of a natural habit. However, these habits, when puts them under a microscope, or rather under not a microscope, but rather under the flashlight or under the light of wisdom awareness, one sees them. Hey, that's not good for me. It's not good for others. Getting angry at someone is like picking up a hot piece of iron to try and hit someone. Guarantee you burn your own hand, and you may never even lay a blow on them, but guarantee you damage your own self first. When the mind is self-aware, when there's more self-awareness and not just going through life based on habits, then there is an opportunity to put these natural reactions under a spotlight. And instead of reacting, we respond with wisdom. And that is an example of, as I just mentioned, absorbing negative and emanating positive. And so changing a negative habit into a positive habit has long-term effects on others, but also on ourselves and our own rebirth. We have long been building up these unfortunate habits, and now's the time to apply wisdom and be aware of when these unwholesome states arise and make an effort to break the cycle, turn it into a positive, and radiate outwards positive energy instead. But there is this idea that, yes, there's so much negativity in the world because of where we were born from and the habits accumulated in those lifetimes. But in a human existence, we have a wonderful opportunity to change the course and steer the direction of future rebirths away from those unwholesome realms. But this can only be done with self-awareness, with wisdom, with mindfulness. Does that help?
Yeah. So in other words, that when we see all these negative emotions, it's also giving us opportunity to realize that this suffering is all impermanent and non-self in a way.
Yeah, suffering is all around us. We are suffering, others are suffering. And so there is an opportunity to break old habits and build new habits. And those new habits are going to help us in this life, in the next life, and in all future lives, building up good habits. And to do that, though, we need mindfulness, recognizing and not beating ourselves up when a negative reaction occurs naturally, being compassionate to ourselves and saying, yeah, okay, bad habit popping up. Let me use this opportunity to change the direction of that energy from negative to positive and have a more positive effect on the world and a more positive effect on my future in this life, the next life, and future lives.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. Other questions? Okay, next class, I will be in KL. So it'll be a live class. So looking forward to it. If somebody can read the reflection.
Yes. Reflection. Let us recall to our mind this morning. We come to the temple with the soul